Well, thank you very much, Premier, and thanks for the job. It's a good one. And enjoying it and taking seriously the charge you gave me when I picked up this job to add to the normal list of things that governors do a proselytising, advocacy sort of role for the state of Western Australia. And I am indeed deeply grateful for that charge. Could I also thank Richard Wally for his spine-tingling welcome to country. That denouement to his welcome was really extraordinary. And in so doing, acknowledge, of course, the traditional owners of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I've acknowledged the Premier. Could I also acknowledge Minister Linda Reynolds and Leader of the Opposition in the Senate, Penny Wong. The person who I should have, of course, acknowledged first is Dr. Megan Clark, the head of the Australian Space Agency. She's sort of the team leader. And it's great for us to have her here for this gathering of ours. Peter Clinken, of course, our chief scientist. David Bell, CEO of the Space Environmental Research Centre in Canberra. Pam Melroy, who's actually a Dinkum astronaut, and it's terrific to have her here too. Professor Peter Quinn, and of course the Vice Chancellor of UWA, Dawn Freshwater. Well, I'm delighted to see so many here today, especially the mix of school and university students among experts and other space industry professionals from across this region. This has been a subject of interest to me, space that is, since I was Defence Minister of this country very many years ago. And that continues now into that advocacy role I was talking about to assist with the state's argument for its centrality in the way in which we here in Australia and hopefully a broader region participate in the opportunities that are emerging for us all in space. Because space is arguably the defining realm for future human endeavour. It'll no doubt change how we use it, will no doubt change how we live and what we do on Earth. It affects our everyday lives, underpinning everything from essential data for internet and banking systems through to complicated air and marine navigation, down to simply finding our own destinations through GPS or talking on our phones. The critical question is how we use space in the future. And the answer to that will determine global security, human safety and survival, how we live and work. Importantly, the investment centre of gravity related to space is shifting towards leading economies in the Indo-Pacific. As such, it is critical that we examine our shared regional challenges and opportunities to encourage the future peaceful use of space. Critical because, as was identified by the government, federal government, in a 2016 Defence White Paper, there are, quote, new and complex non-geographic security threats in cyberspace, making space an important part of our future security environment. That view is shared by the US Council of Foreign Relations, which highlights the similarities in tasks to secure both outer space and cyberspace. Its view is that the internet, quote, increasingly depends on space-enabled communication and information services. Likewise, the operation of satellites and other space assets relies on internet-based networks. The challenge with this scenario is that space has become contested, congested and competitive, according to an analysis by our Strategic Policy Institute. Contested, it says, because, quote, peer adversaries such as China and Russia are developing a suite of counter-space capabilities, including co-orbital and direct ascent anti-satellite weapons. As well, they are developing soft-kill counter-space capabilities based around electronic warfare, cyber attack and potentially directed energy weapons. Congested because of increasing threats from growing amounts of space debris. Importantly, Australia plays a significant role in monitoring such debris, and competitive because while opening up space to Australia, this also allows the proliferation of militarily relevant space technologies to a broader range of space of state and non-state actors, challenging the traditional market dominance of space powers. Now, of course, Australia has had an exceptional history of involvement in the story of space for many decades. It began with our first space facility, the Woomera Rocket Range, developed in 1947 in John Olsen's state. It became the second biggest launch and tracking facility in the West. In 1967, we launched our first satellite, RESAT, from Woomera, and became the second nation outside the United States to build and launch a satellite. By 1970, Australia was home to the largest number of NASA stations outside the US. Since those early days, we have played a central role in assisting with monitoring and control of NASA missions and at other stations here in WA, as mentioned by the Premier, at Mouchet and Carnarvon, at Honeysuckle Creek and Tidbinbilla in the ACT, and at Parkes, famously in movie terms, in New South Wales. In fact, NASA's Deep Space Network facility, the Canberra Deep Space Communications Complex at Tidbinbilla, opened in 1964, is one of only 3 in the world and a notable example of our alliance. Our own history here in WA is remarkable. We hold a unique position in relation to the development of critical space infrastructure because of our Southern Hemisphere location and longitude and silence. As mentioned earlier by the Premier, our great geography has given us Mouchet and Carnarvon tracking stations, both central to NASA space missions in the 60s. The Carnarvon station was so significant to the Gemini, Apollo and Skylab programs that NASA funded an OTC satellite communication system to improve its communications between the station and the United States. Later, the European Space Agency developed its first deep space ground station at Norcia in 2003. And we also host the United States Air Force space assets at Exmouth in partnership with Australian Defence. A more recent important development has been the Murchison Radio Astronomy Observatory, established by the CSIRO in 2009. Today, this 12,600 hectare site is home to the Square Kilometre Array, the world's largest radio telescope. The SKA project is co-located in South Africa, as I'm sure you all know, and will see a collection of hundreds of thousands of ground radio antennas able to survey galaxies, allowing us to research the early phases of the universe. We'll go back to the beginning of time. Interestingly, the pocket of land is part of the ancestral lands of the Wadjuri Yamatji people, who for thousands of years before the Greeks also observed the sky for guidance and survival. Indeed, as we come to know more and more about Aboriginal stories, it is quite extraordinary the extent to which that brilliant astronomy that they had developed uniquely with their limited resources, and that it ought to be a source of considerable respect and an understanding that as we emerged, of course, from the last ice age, the most advanced civilisation on Earth was the civilisation that we happen to share a country with at the moment. Well, with this new era of big data analytics comes the need for more sophisticated methods of storage and processing, and to this end we're lucky to have the Pawsey Supercomputing Centre located here in Kensington. As well, our universities offer world-class expertise in the area. The International Centre for Radio Astronomy Research is a joint venture by Curtin and UWA. It also happens to be playing a key role, of course, in research for the SKA. And I'm really pleased to note that this conference is being hosted by the Perth USAsia Centre in collaboration with UWA. It's an enormous advantage to this state to have this centre here. This is probably, of every institution that we have, of course the universities have their own style of outreach, but if you're going into general outreach in the region around us, it is of enormous advantage to this state that we host that centre here. And speaking of world-class research, I'm enthused by a new partnership between Curtin and Lockheed Martin in developing the Fire Opal project, a system which uses a range of sensors to track satellites and space debris. It will ultimately provide a persistent view of objects in orbit around the Earth. And this particular partnership is going to be one to watch. You may be surprised to learn, you won't be surprised because the Premier actually mentioned it, there are already 74 international and Australian companies with a presence in WA operating in space and space-related services. An example is the Airbus Zephyr project, which announced in June that will base solar-powered very high-altitude drones in Wyndham as they hope to bridge the gap between current generation unmanned aircraft and satellites. You won't believe this, I was up there recently, they didn't actually have the Zephyr there, but my youthful exuberance as a maker of paper planes and a thrower of them is apparently a vital part of this whole process. You won't believe it, but the Zephyr is actually launched by 5 blokes running as fast as they can down a runway and then throwing the thing. Geez, I hope I'm there when it's launched. It's going to be a ripper to see that and see whether or not the blokes survive the experience. These and other significant future growth opportunities were highlighted in a recent comprehensive state government review of our space industry capability. It noted our competitive advantage in agriculture, mining, offshore oil and gas, remote operations and robotics. As the Premier has mentioned, these will be the ongoing focus of state government initiatives. Nationally, a review of Australia's space industry capability was released in March. The review, chaired by the lady I referred to earlier, Dr. Megan Clark, confirmed that the current rapid reinvention of the global space industry has not been seen since humans walked on the moon. The review acknowledged that the link between security and space offers challenges and opportunities. Importantly, it reinforced our capability in secure space communications, saying we can play a role in supporting global rules for safe and secure operations in space, as well as developing standards for responsible behaviour in space. It outlined a broad range of areas where Australia could harness its competitive advantage and capabilities. They include communications technologies and services and satellite and deep space communication ground stations. There are also opportunities for us in space situational awareness and debris monitoring as part of global networks, as well as in positioning, navigation and timing infrastructure to enhance the competitiveness of the broader economy, including agriculture, transport, mining, oil and gas, and national securities. Other capabilities include the application of advanced integrated Earth observation satellite data for the benefit of all Australians and to increase Australian exports of these services. Of great promise are the research and development prospects in areas of national strength to support our participation in joint space missions and space tourism, as well the extraordinary industry applications for space and remote medicine, space physics, planetary science, quantum communications, artificial intelligence and robotics, and autonomous systems for remote asset management on Earth and in space. So looking at all of this, if we don't get up to speed on it all, you can see we're going to be in serious trouble. All of these exciting space possibilities are going to be outlined and expanded upon by Dr. Clark when she gives her keynote address soon. Of particular importance to our space future, our giant leap, so to speak, has been the recent establishment of Australia's first space agency. And while it's initially operating out of Canberra, I'm hoping, along with the rest of us here, that our strong case to headquarter the agency will be successful. But not the least, our involvement as a future super hub. The agency is charged with working to transform and grow the industry by setting national policy and strategy, leading international space engagement and inspiring the Australian community in the next generation of space entrepreneurs. It is a brilliant development and it bodes well for Australia's internationally respected space industry, gaining a greater share of the expanding approximate $480 billion global space market. Importantly, the agency recently received formal backing from the US House of Representatives in a resolution which commended the Commonwealth Government and recognised our cooperation on, and I quote, space research, exploration and utilisation, including on terrestrial research, commercial activities and human and robotic space exploration. Think of that. This is one of the few things this year that the US House of Representatives has been able to agree on. It also stated support for deeper cooperation with Australia in contributing each country's unique strengths and resources to mutual prosperity and security. And I do share the excitement of Dr. Clark when she spoke of the agency's future work in these terms. No other industry can inspire nations quite like space, where human ambition can set its sights on interplanetary missions, colonisation beyond Earth, and the opportunity of finding new life. We can dream this big because of the space-based technologies that have connected the world in unprecedented ways. And in the coming decades, Australia has the opportunity to become a global leader in pushing Earth's links with space even further. Naturally, there are complex issues around our economic and security issues in space. The 2017 Foreign Policy White Paper flagged those as poised to grow with the expansion of space-based and space-enabled capabilities, and emphasised the need for robust rules and norms to maximise the benefits of greater access to space while tackling challenges such as debris. We face defence and foreign policy issues also that involve challenges and potential risks to our national sovereignty and security. Our relationship with the US has been vital to our ongoing focus on the space domain, particularly over the last half-decade when we have entered into agreements to host the next generation of joint facilities. These have been crucial to the bonds which drive our alliance system. We often talk of that in terms, that alliance arrangement, of shared values and history. That's important, but I'm afraid, frankly, it's secondary. Ours is a military alliance, and those new joint facilities, combined with the others at Alice Springs and naval communications at North West Cape, are actually an important card for us in the relationship, and will be an important card for us as we utilise our opportunities, the opportunities that we're developing for our own involvement in space activities. I am acutely aware of the need for the Department of Defence to be at the forefront of space developments. It must be ready to manage the consequences for Australia of non-geographic threats in cyberspace and in space. Hence our recent national commitment to investing in modern space and cyber capabilities, as well as infrastructure, information and communication systems that will support defence capability in the future. That's why I'm so glad to see here representatives of both sides of Parliament, with Minister Reynolds on one side and Leader Penny Wong on the other, and of course the members of Parliament here. This has got to be a combined effort in which we demonstrate a bipartisanship on effectiveness that is being denied our principal ally. We need this because the potential threats clearly exist. This is despite the 1967 Outer Space Treaty enshrining the principle that the space environment must be protected as a global commons and used peacefully to ensure the future of our planet and humankind. Regional cooperation is the modern vanguard fundamental to that ideal. We must strive to lead the way in new developments and ideas as we continue to explore and expand our peaceful joint space interests. This conference brings together your expertise, your talents, in front of an audience of people who actually will have the skills to be able to deal with the opportunities that we put forward, and I wish you a very productive day.